So first of all, a warm welcome, Manuel Pais, to Data Explored.
Thank you.
Uh, Thank you. It's an honor to have you on. You are for the listeners, I can inform you that everyone that or the people watching that you are a very seasoned keynote speaker. You're the co-inventor of the concept of Team Topologies, which is both a book and an academy. So you're obviously the co-author of also of the platform manifesto that you authored that also, and your fast flow thought leader, and you speak Portuguese. I see,
I
I
do,
see
but not on
many.
this webinar.
No, I wanted to say something in Portuguese, but I can't. I'm sorry, but
It's okay.
uh, it's a real pleasure to have you on. Manuel Paz, I've been enjoying your work quite a lot, followed you closely, and we've set up this call to talk about the second edition of your book, Team Topologies. And I know I have my background on, so I'm not sure I can, but I have both the first and the second edition
Nice.
because I read yeah, I had like I have had I've I have a habit now of not throwing out first editions of the books that I buy in the second edition because I find that sometimes I take notes and I think and I kind of like I lose orientation if I can't go back and find that. I know I'm a geek, but anyway, that's just how I am. But
Yeah.
I read your book and that you co-authored with Matthew Skelton. And so basically, I guess, I mean, I have a lot of questions, and we also had the time to just go through some things before we went live, and maybe we will have time to talk about that during this call. We have about an hour. And if anyone wants to ask questions, please use the Q&A and not the and not the chat. But for this webinar, um, I suggest that we go ahead and talk about some of the things around the book in the beginning, and not in the book, but surrounding the book. Because obviously it's still a bit too early to talk about the second edition in terms of how it's done. But the first edition, because it's just out, right? But the first
Yeah,
edition,
September last year.
oh, September already. Yeah, time passes so fast. Is it really September last year?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there you go. But what I want to know is like the first edition have several thousand reviews on Amazon. And so don't give me a number. I don't think you should, but it's been doing well, that book, right? So how does it feel to write a book that's been doing so well?
Well, feels really good. And but I wanted to say thank you for inviting me as well. Obviously, I admire your work as an author as well, and you've done really good as well. And I've enjoyed um, our exchanges also about different topics. The book, so Team Topologies came out in 2019, the first edition. It did really well. I think obviously, and we were talking a little bit about this before we started. For me, the book, and for Matthew as well, was not something that we said, "Oh, we have this great idea, let's write about this." Was something that was solidified over many years of my experience and his experience, and I think there were multiple factors for the success. I think the last numbers I remember was like 200,000 copies in the first 5 years, something like that. So that's pretty good.
Oh,
I think it was a combination of factors. Was the our experiences, me and Matthew, combined really well. Um, we wrote the book at the time when many companies, and this we heard this time and time again, was like, this is exactly what we needed because we knew we had some organizational issues, but we didn't have a structured way to think about it. It also built on me and Matthew worked several years consulting around DevOps, continuous delivery. So if you think about the principles behind that, they're very aligned to the principles of team topologies, except we're talking more on the organizational side rather than kind of the technical and practices side. Um, and it was, I think, the right time to write that book. We had done some work on what we call DevOps topologies before. It was started by Matthew, and then I helped expand that, and that was a website. It's still online if anyone wants to check DevOps topologies. And then we started to realize this is the patterns are broader than just DevOps, which was a big thing at the time. Um, and that what's really cool, and now I'm going off track a bit, but you can always stop me. But
No,
what's really
no,
cool
no.
to see now is that obviously that everyone's talking about AI, right? When we think about the patterns we wrote in team topologies and the principles, which one of the things we try to make stronger in the second edition, there's a new forward, which is going more in depth about what were the principles behind team topologies in the first edition, because we actually didn't write too much about that. We kind of dived more straight into the patterns and the goals, but there are a set of principles. And when you look at AI and kind of from an organizational perspective, most, I would say almost everything we wrote in the first edition still applies in terms of managing cognitive load, how do you organize for fast flow and give teams more agency and all these things. Of course, when you put AI on top, that might accelerate certain things, but it also might slow down other things if you're not organized in a way that is focused on delivering value to customers. But anyway, I was going a bit off track there.
No, not at all. Not at all. I think, and we can dive deeper into that, in fact, in a little while. But before we do so, there are so many things in the book that I like that are surprising. Like, I guess a lot of people in tech have heard of Conway's law because it mirrors so precisely the effect computer systems have on organizations, right? So it's really interesting to discuss Conway's law and the consequences and how do you avoid it and so forth, right? You also cite Conway's law, but you also cite more than that, you cite a lot of other books and a lot of other perspectives. And one of the books that you cite is is this book you were inspired by called Improving Performance: How to Manage the White Space on the Organization Chart.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting observation right there. Like what is the potential that you see, that you saw, but I guess that you still see obviously in the white space of the org chart, and like to just like set the stage a little bit for the people listening in. Obviously, an organization diagram has boxes and arrows, and it has titles of business units and so forth. But right next to all of that, obviously, is the white space. But what you're saying is that there's something in the white space. There's a potential in that white space that has to unfold for organizations to become effective. So what did you see in the white space, Manuel?
Yeah, that was the really key concept, or when I from that book was this idea of the white space, right? Because it so crystallizes a lot of the, let's say, dysfunctions in organizations, which is we look at the org chart and kind of usually make sense, like we organize like this, the different areas and stuff. But then the white space is all the stuff that is not represented there, which happens day to day. So it's almost like the things that are not intentionally declared and understood, and oftentimes has to do with interfaces between teams, between departments. Because then, if you look at an org chart, like you said, it all kind of boxes and arrows, and you kind of see how you're organized. If you overlay how the work is actually gets done, that's where you start. The white space becomes becomes how should I say? It becomes more visible that there's a lot of stuff that's not clearly intentionally thought about, and that's where you start to see. And this is like interesting, very simple exercise people can do in their own organization is like think about some work that you delivered, maybe some new feature or something of value, and you start to draw a line about through the org chart, like which departments and teams had to be involved, and you start to get into often this big mess, right? Just and it's interesting, even in the second edition of Team Topologies, there's one case study. So there are 10 new case studies in the second edition, because that was one of the goals of the second edition was to have cases that companies started by applying team topologies, right? In the first edition, the cases were more focused on specific patterns, but now we're talking about companies and big companies that really took the ideas and implemented. And so there's a company called Telenet in Belgium. They're one of the main telecom operators. Um, and in the case study, they saw the starting point was that they had all these tribes, and just by so you look at just the organization of the by tribes, and it makes sense, like in on paper, like okay, there's the tribe for customer support, tribe for this and that, and then they drew the lines, like I was saying, like when work actually happens, what are the dependencies, and it just basically it's lines all over the place. And that's where the white space that was before becomes like, okay, now it's that's maybe we can call it dark space. I don't know. It just becomes clear that there was a lot of things that were not working well. And then that case study is super interesting, by the way, because they actually applied some of the concepts and the types of teams we talk in team topologies at the tribe level. So they're saying this tribe is kind of focused on end customer. This tribe is focused on, it's like a platform tribe to provide internal capabilities and so on. But yeah, from that point of view of the white spaces, those things that are not intentionally clearly defined, and they end up becoming massive blockers to delivering value to our customers.
Yes, I mean, I see the white space as both a hidden maze, and at the same time, I see it as the way work actually gets done, right? So
Yeah,
it's both these things. It's the hustle and bustle of everyday work that is not really represented in those very formal charts. And we'll get back to the case
yeah,
studies and the changes that you made in the second edition, because it's all really like very worthwhile reading. And so we'll definitely get back to that. But I guess, I mean, and I know that you have done this a bazillion times. So please don't fall off the chair by boredom, Manuel.
this is fine.
But very, 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 very briefly described, what are the teams that you suggest companies adopt?
Yeah, yeah, sure,
The,
no,
the...
no problem. It's like a band playing the best hits, right? Every night. Uh, no, but actually, I've like in like I was saying, when we wrote first edition, I think that's one of the main differences to second edition. The first edition was very much like we had seen this patterns and this work. We had done all we had, like I said, solidified a lot of these patterns and ideas from our work, and then we wanted to put it into the book. Um, and so I used to kind of, okay, this is this type of team and that type of team. Today I like to, and with you, I like to start from the why, right? So team topology is about achieving a fast flow of value to the customer. So that's already something to be mindful that we're not just saying let's go fast and become a machine of delivering stuff. It's value is only realized when there's someone consuming what you're providing, and it helps them and it helps your organization, right? That's
Mhm.
where you get value delivered. It's not delivering just features or uh, AI slop or what have you. So if we want that, then if we and to some extent the types of teams we talk about in team topologies are meant as um, magnets, in the sense this is where we want what we should be aiming to get. And the first type is what we call stream aligned teams. So it's similar to cross-functional product teams, the reason why we wanted to make a distinction with streams is that products tend to be very complex. And so you can't have one team responsible for a whole product. So we need to think inside products, what are the different streams? And the streams can be aligned to, well, there are different user personas for this same product. So we maybe need different teams focused on different, the more experienced personas, less experienced, or whatever the difference might be. Or we have different user journeys, obviously, inside the product, and maybe that's what makes sense as different streams. Or sometimes it is like a set of functionality or features that is fairly independent from each other. So that might be your streams. Often is a combination of these different factors. And actually that kind of connects to what you're saying earlier about Conway's law, where from a technical architecture point of view, we obviously moved from, well, monoliths are bad, they're big applications and it's difficult to change and evolve. And then microservices came and like, okay, if we have all this modularity and small services, we can evolve them faster. But then actually we were missing something in the middle, which is kind of whatever you want to call it, macro services or whatever services are a good match for one team, right? Because you probably don't want to have hundreds of small services that the same team has to deal with. So that's where you have these stream-aligned teams ideally should be responsible for a service or part of a product that is mostly independent from the rest, that it can evolve independently and provide value to customers. So it's not just a technical component, is actually this is something that has a clear value and we understand who are the users of this and what their needs are. Now, the difficulty with those kind of teams is that you are expecting in a fairly small team to have a lot of different competencies and skills. And there's also a lot to do in terms of understanding your customers, doing discovery, and then actually translating that into actual software or the thing we need to build, and then delivering that to customers, and then analyzing if it's being used, if it's improving the business metrics and all this. Ideally, that's within the scope of the streamline team. And so that's a lot to deal with. And that's the main reason why we include other types of teams. So there are 3 other types of teams, which are enabling teams, and this tend to be experts in some domain, and their role is not to do the expert work, let's say, is to help teams gain the knowledge so they can do the work. Right? So that's a very important shift in kind of traditional view of where you have some kind of shared experts. These are the only people who know how to do X. If those people work in an enabling way, they will be providing, it's the old saying, don't give people the fish, give them teach them how to fish so they can be more self-sufficient. And then we have, so that's more on the, let's say, on the competencies side. And then there are platform teams, which we clarified a bit in the second edition, but essentially teams that provide internal products, if you like, to see them as products for the internal teams to use so that they have less to worry about. They have less what we call cognitive load because we have an internal services that can help us. Often starts with a lot of the technical aspects like doing deployments, monitoring, infrastructure. All of that can be done in ways that are automated, ideally by the platform, and easy to use. And so it removes a lot of concerns from the Streamline team so that they can focus on the customer needs. And then we had complicated subsystem teams, which we kind of discussed a lot because if those are really needed, but there are occasional situations where you have a very complex algorithm or some subsystem and some service even that does some complex processing, or it has very high demanding kind of processing needs or computing needs, and sometimes you need a team dedicated to that service or subsystem, because if you ask the streamline team to do it, it's just going to explode their cognitive capacity. And so those complicated subsystem teams can be seen almost like a kind of mini platform. It's
Mhm.
just one kind of subsystem or service, but it should be provided in a way that's easy for the streamline teams to consume.
Yeah,
So those
thank
are the
you. Thank
four
you.
types. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time. That must have been time number, I don't know how many million times you've said this,
I've
but
lost count.
they, yeah, sure. But we kind of needed to establish this because basically the teams that you suggest, they work in topologies, right? That's the idea of team topologies. It's that these teams, they
Yeah.
work in specific constellations, in specific companies to do specific things, right?
Yeah. And they evolve, or they should be evolving fairly continuously. So the topology is then, yeah, a combination of different types of teams, um, and their interactions as well, right? To look at it as a system, um, where again, ideally, if we had only streamlined teams with all the competencies and reasonable cognitive load on all of them, then that's all we would need. Just have streamlined teams working in parallel, delivering value to customers. But we know that's not very realistic. So the topology is almost like this idea of the team of teams that work together effectively to deliver then the value to the customers. But then it should evolve over time, like based on what challenges do we have today. Is there, if we think about today, maybe there are some gaps in teams adopting AI or understanding, yeah, how to integrate AI in our workflows, in our products, in an ethical way. And there's a lot of questions that maybe we need help from some experts or some enabling team that can help the streamline teams figure out this stuff. Maybe we need some platform tooling that makes it easier to use some of this new approaches. So that those might be the challenges today, but maybe in 1, 2, 3 years, this stuff is more or less established in the organization. We kind of know what to use, and teams have, enough knowledge. So maybe we don't need the same enabling teams, or maybe there are some new platform services because what used to be more experimental now has been established. This is a good way to do this, and we can sort of provide it as a platform service. So it's very key to look at topologies as not a static thing. It's not a static, let's say, operating model. Is what's working today to address the challenges we have,
Mhm.
which are going to evolve in the next months, years.
Yeah, and I like the flexibility of that. Like it's an organizational structure that is capable of adapting, changing, refocusing. And uh, anyone that's been in tech knows that that needs to be like be possible for an organization to
Yeah,
do. If not, you get these very, very heavy setups with teams of high complexity and low
yeah.
value production, basically. Guess we've all been there at some point in our career.
And it's
Um,
also interesting to what I realize is a lot of companies invest quite heavily in not just tooling, but a lot of in tooling, in expertise, and uh, having good practices. Obviously now we're talking about AI, but there was uh, before, you know, DevOps and CI/CD. If we're talking about kind of more technical aspects, obviously, you're in the data field. Things like data mesh and all these things. Um, of course, they require expertise and tools often, but they invest a lot in that, but they don't invest in the enabling part. So it's like we have really good stuff that we can use, but people are not taking advantage of them because these streamlined teams or product teams are busy in their day to day and they have a lot of pressure to deliver, and no one has been went to help them figure out how to do this stuff well, right? Often they might adopt some stuff because there's some pressure to, okay, we need to do DevOps or whatever. And so, but they often end up doing it in kind of in a haphazard way. So the enabling part is really interesting, and to me at least, is one of the things I'm more proud from Team Topologies. This is something which feels unfamiliar to many organizations, and when they see it happening, they can see the impact it has, but it's just as simple as teach people how to use these great tools and practices. Don't just provide them and expect them to magically learn, right? Because there's often
Mm.
not enough space to learn and really adopt things in practice.
No, I mean, I guess I can admit that I'm a geek, but like seeing enterprise technology actually working is just such a pleasure for me, and so I've experienced that many times myself. Obviously, I think the failure rate of enterprise technology is dramatically high. When I worked in other roles, I saw that from time to time, right? These failed IT
Yeah,
projects or those teams that were like hired, and typically those would be data scientists about 10 years back, right? And they would have enormous salaries and they wouldn't do anything really, or very little, but be mathematical geniuses. And like, how disappointing can that be, right? But anyway, I mean,
yeah,
and so that really touches on the flexibility and the usability of like technical skill sets and people and technology. And I guess, I mean, this team topology, it's like the organizational dimension of these technological decentralizations that we've seen, data mesh, microservices. How closely related are these, and how do you tend to think of this connection with these decentralization
yeah.
movements of technology?
Yeah, I would say like if you take a 10,000 feet view, it's actually what you mentioned before. Conway's law talks about kind of the impact of how we're organized and how we can communicate and the interfaces between teams and the kind of systems we're able to produce. Um, and there's a like third dimension to that, which is the actual business architecture, if you like. So different companies have different vocabulary, if you like, to talk about how their business is organized. I like to talk about value streams. If companies that are more have used like things like domain-driven design tend to talk about business domains, subdomains. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the same, which is to understand your business architecture. Like what value do you provide to each customers and how is this organized? What's in different value streams or domains, etc. And so that business architecture, if it's aligned to your organizational architecture, the way you're structured and org chart, and but also the communication channels and all that, and if that's aligned to your technical architecture, then you have a really good advantage that these things are aligned; they're not fighting each other. So I think what has happened, I don't know if it's a bit how you say it, arrogant of me to say this, but I think until Team Topologies, there was kind of separation between, okay, there's the technical architecture, and that's where things like microservices and data mesh to some extent come in, and those patterns, those ideas are good and helpful, but they were not connected to the rest, to the organizational side. We were not seeing maybe as much the impact of if we just adopt microservices, like I was saying earlier. Okay, if you end up with hundreds or thousands of microservices, you have a lot uh, higher load on managing all those services, and often what then companies start to realize, this is not actually helping us go faster. We have more kind of loads than than before because they have all these small services, and often they were not broken or split by customer focus. We're more like on a functional basis, and so I think that was the gap that was happening, that we adopt these good technical practices, but then they don't have the impact that we expected on the business and the ability to provide value quickly. And that's why I think at some point we need to. That's why we try to introduce also in Team Topologies for teams to think, or when you're thinking about the technical architecture, to think about what makes sense for one team of usually up to 8, 9 people. What makes sense as a service or part of a product for one team to be able to handle and deliver value mostly independently on that specific service or stream, right? So it's kind of connecting the dots, if you like.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how like when I guess I can be honest about this. I don't know if I should be embarrassed about it or not, but I knew that Team Topologies was an important. I knew that Team Topologies was an important book before I read it. I just really didn't know why, and it took like I read, and then in the beginning I still didn't understood why. Why is this important? And then it clicked, right? That exact thing that you're mentioning just clicked that, okay, we're used to thinking of technologies as something that you need to break up. You need to break up the data architectures. You need to break up the big ERP systems, whatever it is. You need to kind of unlock the monolith to unleash the potential of what it is you're dealing with. And then it just struck me that, okay, this book is about the fact that you can do the same thing, or you need to do the same thing for your organization. That's also a monolith, and you can also break it up. And that's what this book is about. And then I got it. And at least I think I got it, but you tell me. But
I
anyway,
think you
I
do.
mean, well, thank you, Manuel. We need, we got that on tape.
And
Thank you.
and just
So,
to, like, if you connect that to what you were asking before about why the success of the book, I think is, on one hand, a lot of people said I felt seen, like when we're talking about pain points and why what you just said, like if we're looking only in one dimension, then we're doing our best to improve, let's say, technical architecture and the way we work, and we're not seeing the impact um, on the other side. So people felt very identified with how we were describing the issues. Um, and then some people also said, like, and I would agree, like the ideas we brought in terms of solution, let's say, or the patterns, they build on a lot that has been done in the past, DevOps movement, agile to some extent, system thinking, very, very important as well. So some people would say, well, there's nothing super novel about team topologies, but was like how was bringing those things together, giving it vocabulary. And like I said before, I think the enabling part is the one that maybe a lot of people hadn't thought about, making that more intentional. But a lot of the stuff, of course, is built on what we've known from the past, even like the ideas like platform as a product. Um, but was like bringing things together. I think at the end of the day, that's what Team Topologies did, and maybe that's why you're saying like it took a while to understand why is this important. Is like it's connecting, I think, the dots, right, of a lot of stuff that we've felt, we've known. This is something off here. Why aren't we seeing different results? So I think that's to me the power of Team Topologies is that bringing in a fairly shortish book, bring things together and having an understanding of the organizational side, and it's also very aligned to the technical principles of and the ideas behind DevOps and continuous delivery. So it made sense for a lot of technical people too.
absolutely. I felt seen by that book also. So, as many other readers did. Let's dive a little bit more into the second edition now. There are some changes, and you've already mentioned this a bit, but let's unpack it some more.
Yeah.
I want to end the conversation with the case studies because there's so many and they're so interesting and they're so different, right? So I want to keep that topic like for a little later. The first thing I think we should talk about basically, and that's something that it's very close to my heart because I've worked the majority of my career. So let me just set the stage a bit here. This is a long introduction to a short question. Please bear with me. But I've worked in the majority of my career in big enterprise as an internal employee, but also as an external consultant providing advice to many, and that took off basically with me becoming a tech author, and what I wrote resonated. So I created my own consultancy company next to my internal job. What I did and what I was confronted with a lot was these multiple identical technologies or technologies that did more or less the same thing, but perhaps not completely the same thing. Very much for because of the study that or the direction that I took, very much at the metadata layer. These technologies that I think of as being capable of being connected into a grid, a metagrid that I called it. But enough about me. I mean, what I find so interesting is that you changed one particular team in the team topology setup, which is the platform team, and it's based. And I guess your co-author Matthew he said that you actually discussed it during the writing of the first edition, but
Yeah.
then it got lost in some Slack thread or something. But you changed the setup. You changed the name from platform team to a platform grouping. Why is that?
Yeah.
Why is a platform
Um,
grouping now?
so if I may just to mention the second edition
Hmm.
for people who have not seen it. So the idea was we didn't sort of touch the first edition because, like I said earlier, um, everything that was in the first edition still stands basically. Maybe we're not talking as much about DevOps as we were in 2019, but the ideas still stand. And then what we did was there's a new forward, which is mostly looking backwards in the 5, 6 years since the first edition was published, and like what were the things that also we got wrong or that were not clear enough in the first book. Like what were the principles behind it, and then things like how the patterns were adopted in different ways by different companies, like Telenet that I mentioned earlier, applying the types of teams, but at the tribe level. So, and then there's a new afterward, which is kind of more connecting to where we are today and in the next years with AI and how does that change or not, how we think about the organizational dynamics. Um, and then there are 10 new case studies. And then there's that note about the platform grouping. So what happened the first edition is we wanted to keep it simple. So the idea of the platform team, on one hand, to keep it simple, the platform team has another type of team because it's some people say, well, it's kind of a product team because it's an internal product. Yes, but we felt like there were enough differences because you have internal customers, not external, and often you're providing, often from a technical point of view, complex services. We were talking about um, a lot of the kind of technical services. So what we kind of missed, and maybe this is something I did realize at the time of the first edition, is how that idea of the platform team would be sort of misunderstood sometimes, as in a single team that is
Mm,
responsible for a whole platform. And of course, over time, your internal platforms tend to grow. If they're successful, which is a good thing, they will tend to grow. And so for me, at least, it was, I guess, one of those things that to me seemed kind of obvious, that you would need multiple teams and you would need for this bigger platform. If it's small and you have one or two teams, that's fine. But if you start having, three, four, five, or you start having like basically more than, I would say, 30 people in the platform working in the platform, you need to think what are the different streams inside the platform, right? What are the different services, so that you also organize the platform structure from a team perspective, similar way as you do for your products. We need to identify different streams if it's just the customers are internal. And that's the part where in some organizations we would talk to them and realize they just had this massive platform team with dozens of people. And of course, they were extremely busy, extremely overloaded, running around trying to work on, fixing stuff and trying to deliver new stuff, but it was all very ad hoc. So that's why in the second edition, we tried to make it much more clear that, in fact, and maybe that's a better framing, is like it's always a platform grouping. You're going to have a set of teams and they should have uh, well-defined responsibilities and boundaries between them. Doesn't mean that they're totally independent all the time, but we should not have, five teams that need to coordinate work all the time. Um, and so if you start to think from, it's a platform grouping, but in sometimes it's only one team in that grouping, maybe that's a better way to think about it, which we missed in the first edition. On the other hand, because it was simpler when we talk about platform teams, it helped, I think, also organizations to understand difference between
mm.
platform and streamlined on the product side. But now it's
That's
hopefully clear.
Yeah, sure, no, but I agree, and I obviously am thinking about similar things. I'm currently writing the second edition of my first book, the Enterprise Data Catalog, and it's a little bit the same thing, right? In terms of like the first edition talks about one data catalog in a company and one data catalog only. The reality is that in most cases you will have a handful of data catalogs,
Yeah,
and they will be rooted or like located in various parts of the business. Some uses one cloud provider, some uses a specific data platform with the attached catalog, some uses a like that. It's just like that is a very natural thing,
yeah.
and I guess it's the privilege of writing a second edition. There are not a lot of privileges in that. It's a hard work, but 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 one of them is that you get to build on the established knowledge of the first edition, right?
Yeah.
So it would have been difficult, I can
Oh,
sense.
yeah. I would say it's actually a good indicator if you realize in the second edition there were some things in the first edition that were misunderstood. It means that they were adopted, right? And organizations were applying the ideas. It's just maybe some things were not as clear as they could have been. But you never, that's one of the things, like as with, developing products and services, you realize that this is what we thought was what made sense. Actually, we need to adjust and course correct. So I kind of see the second edition as we're course correcting or adding more context and adding more kind of insights to what was already there in the first edition.
Absolutely. And I like I want to go into details about so specifically for the second edition, as you mentioned, there are a lot of case studies. And I think we should go into these case studies. I focused on two, but you're welcome to mention the third one. But I
Sure.
think um, EBSCO, I believe, is the I have to. I'm getting a lot of notifications on a different platform, and I'm just shutting it off. Just sorry.
No worries.
It's just a lot of noise.
Too many attention
Too many.
requests.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. Um, so there you are. Great. So basically, let's first talk about what is the name EBSCO of the first use case? Is it EBSCO, the company?
Yeah, EBSCO.
EBSCO. The reason why I wanted to talk about that case, obviously, it's a smaller one, I believe, but it's interesting that they have been working with a framework for setting up teams also, like Team Topologies. They have thought about building an organizational structure that could help them deliver more, and that is safe agile. But in this
Yeah.
case, they kind of ran out of potential with safe agile. And can you unfold why is that, and what did you do
Yeah.
that changed their setup?
Um, so I didn't do uh, I didn't work on that directly. And actually most of the case studies, which is interesting, in the second edition, we were not involved directly. It's not that we were doing the change for them. This was how the companies themselves thought about applying the ideas and how they change, and that's really cool. And then by different means, we ended up finding out, and or they came to us and talked about what they had done. In some cases, we had done maybe some keynotes or some training, but often we were not in the keynote in the case studies in second edition. We were not directly involved, so I think that's pretty cool as well. um, so EBSCO is one of those interesting ones where I'm guessing if you ask anyone in the audience here, I would guess almost no one heard about EBSCO. um, but so it's one of these, and then you realize, oh, this is actually a pretty big company. So they provide, research databases and um, information for libraries, universities, etc. So it's one of those businesses, not something that's talked about very often. Um, and what happened was they had been using SAFe, I would say fairly successful. Um, Obviously, SAFe is a framework that, depending, in my view, if you're starting from a very chaotic organization where there's always delays and everyone's running around and everyone's trying to get stuff done, but it's always big chaos. Of course, I think Safe can help give you some structure and figure out how to do better planning, and it provides you a lot of clarity, I would say, on dependencies that you have between teams, between domains or value streams. The issue with Safe is that at some point, and we've seen this not just with EBSCO, with other companies, it kind of helps you move from that early stage of more chaotic and to something more structured, a bit more or a lot more predictable. But at some point, it kind of stops helping, in the sense of it's very much about managing dependencies and not so much about removing them or dealing with the effects of those dependencies.
Mm.
Basically, you start living with it. Okay, we know the dependencies. We know we need to do this planning so that we can have usually a quarterly plan for which teams are going to have to work on which initiatives or features, etc. So depending, like I said, if you're starting from a point where everything was chaotic and all the deadlines were missed, then yes, that helps. But then you're kind of stopped there. And so what they did at EBSCO really well was that they had really good metrics, like flow metrics, and looking at where are the bottlenecks, where are the wait times to deliver the value to our customers, or deliver changes to hopefully will be valuable to our customers. And so they themselves started to realize, okay, we've improved a lot, but we're sort of stagnated, right? We got to, let's say, a peak of what safe can help us with. And so then they turn to Team Topologies to then start addressing, okay, let's not just live with the dependencies. We actually need to be, then using the patterns to remove blocking dependencies, provide internal capabilities that actually help accelerate teams. Um, and because they had very good internal kind of that organizational telemetry, if you like, good, very good
Mhm.
metrics that, and that's part of why the case studies was interesting to us, is that then they were able to see how using team topologies helped improve those metrics.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess if you are safe, agile certified, like me and like many others, you can kind of sense that there's an upper limit as to how much it can deliver,
Mm,
right? I've heard people call it a framework monolith. I don't know if you want to adapt that, given that it's a competing framework, but if you take a look at it, like on their webpage, it's certainly there are a lot of boxes that you need to understand and how they relate in order to like it's
yeah,
not a
it's
simple
a
setup, right?
it's a big upfront investment on one hand, and then to me, besides that kind of investment aspect, is just it seems to lead you. So we were talking earlier how we need to be adaptive and sort of continuously evolve. And I think, and I'm now no safe expert, but from what I've seen, is it seems to lead you to a point where you get this kind of stable monolithic framework, whatever, which works within that scope, but then you're sort of not really thinking about what's the next step. How do we continue to improve? Um, and obviously, there's the release trains and all this stuff, which I think, like you said, represents it well. It helps to some extent, but then there's an upper limit because we're coupled in this release trains. And um, anyway, it was interesting. At some point, Safe took some ideas from Team Topologies, but not others, which to me,
Mm.
yes. So they took essentially the team types, which I think was a step forward, but you're still not necessarily thinking about improving your flow just by adopting the team types. And if you still have those release trains, you're still coupling, at least temporarily, coupling a lot of the work, which tends to then manifest in coupling at the technical level as well, right? Because if we're
Yeah,
going to do a release
great.
together anyway in whatever 4 weeks, why should I invest in making this more modular and can evolve more independently if at the end of the day we have to, integrate everything together?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll change the end of this conversation a bit uh, by simply admitting that I think Safe Agile is a patchwork of methodologies. I actually didn't know that they took stuff from Team Topologies, but that's very typical of them, right? They also took stuff from Lean and other principles. And so obviously if you believe in that, maybe it can provide a lot of value. I think it can at a basic level, but it gets very, very complicated. I wanted to ask you about another case study, but I think we're running out of time. And so instead, it's the Adidas case study. I just find their platform, the digital platform architecture, really interesting, but we don't have time. It's too complicated to
Yeah.
go through in a couple of minutes. So instead, I was thinking like we were talking a bit before we went live. And so instead of, I wanna ask another question, a more high level one, is that you published these books at IT Revolution. It's just such a great publishing house, the home of the Phoenix Project and many other very influential books, even though they don't publish a lot of books. Like, what is what kind of publishing house, like how did you establish the work with them, and what's kind of their, like, the nature of that publishing house?
Yeah, so they are very focused on essentially helping enterprise leaders. Um, and the books they publish, like you said, it only a handful of books per year. They have they're small house, and they're really focused on publishing the books that are relevant and make sense for enterprise leaders. Obviously, different published companies have different strategies, some based on volume. Their focus is on quality of what they publish. And like you said, the reason why they had already published some seminal books, Phoenix Project, Accelerate, and From Project to Product from Mick Kirsten as well.
Mhm.
So we felt that our book, which our intention, we thought our target audience initially was going to be enterprise leaders, also kind of business leaders and senior engineers and architects. And so it was a very good match with the IT Revolution audience. I knew Jin Kim from before, from my work with DevOps. So yeah, it all just seemed to make sense. We were actually, at least I wasn't actually at the time as familiar with kind of the publishing world and these different approaches to publishing and editing. So it was sort of, I think we were very lucky that they accepted. They saw the value of our proposal, and then they have a very thorough kind of editorial process. So if you would read the first draft of Team Topologies, that was going to be hard because it was very much, as many people who never wrote a book before, sort of academic in structure
Mm.
and the editors at IT Revolution, shout out to them. They really helped us. Okay, let's turn this into an actual narrative that people can consume. They can reference later, like you were saying, about the first edition. Our goal was also a book that people they can read it and then come back later. Oh, I want to. I remember something in chapter 6 that would be helpful for my current situation, so as a reference. So they really helped turn that first draft into way better version, and we trusted them because in the beginning we're like, they want to destroy our work. That's how it feels, right? When someone's like saying, "This is you need to rearrange a lot of the way you're talking about in the book." So yeah, that was sort of the story, and that made a huge difference. I think also in success of the book, I'm sure.
Mm. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that detail also. We're running out of time. I discovered a question in the Q&A from Sabrina Schiele. We don't have time to go through it. I'll send it to you, and maybe we can answer it offline. But Manuel, I want to take the time to thank you very much for being on here, Data Explored. I hope the listeners got a lot out of it. I certainly did. I wish the second edition a fantastic life, and
Thank you.
that you will stay in touch. You know.
We will. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.